actually started the meeting at 5:30 with an executive session. The topic was personnel matters, and there are no motions coming out of that. So if I can move on, first of all, to the warrants.
I started with the payroll warrants if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I have two payroll warrants. The first one is dated October 1st through October 7th. And it's in the sum of $15,586.44. The second warrant is September 24th through September 30th, or they're payroll warrants, by the way, $16,498.97. Make a motion, we approve.
Are there any questions or comments? If not, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried. Brendan, what do you have?
I have industrial park warrants.
Okay.
Usually this number is around $700 just for electricity, but I get to spend some money today. The total is $13,993.85. $9,500 and change was actually Dromac invoices for the pump station setup, and our DPW director is working with engineers to try to rectify what's going wrong.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of problems up there with having to pump the whole thing out again.
Right. So I'll make a motion we approve.
Any other questions or comments about that? Not all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I have the general warrants dated 10/15/18. There was a total of 61 invoices for $61,363.39. The biggest money spent there was St. Albans Rec. We do a quarterly funding. It saves a lot of individual trips that people used to make down to cash in to get their money back that now the town pays. That's $17,738. That's 29% of the total. The next one was our town Bluecross, Blueshield, what we pay out for our employees monthly. Carrie, I believe that is.
It is, yep.
That's $12,636, and AmCare $11,758, and that's roughly 70% of our total volume of cash that we spent.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions or comments about that? Any of those? Not all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
So the motion passes. Okay. Al, you want to do minutes?
Yeah, I have the minutes for three separate meetings. I'll do them individually. The first is the select board meeting, special select board meeting for October 8th. And before I move it, I just have one question. Under the paragraph beginning, the select board agreed to separate administration and Department of Public Works, DPW. There's a period, but it's not a complete sentence.
Yeah, what that was in the,
In the impact fee study.
That's what I thought.
they were all bundled together.
Right, I understand, we just need to add a
We just
phrase.
split it,
For
we
the
just split
impact
it into
fee.
two separate sections.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the impact fees, okay.
Study.
So with that change, I move that we approve the minutes of October 8th.
You want to do them all at once, or?
No, I'll do it because I have
Okay.
other.
Other than that, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I
For,
missed a meeting, so
Okay.
okay, for the select board meeting of October 3rd, I have just one question. The last paragraph, design team selection. Did we make a decision on that?
No, we were talking about doing an RFP for the design selection, for design. What paragraph are you talking about?
Design team selection.
I think no design team has been selected.
Okay, so there was no decision.
No.
It's just not clear in that paragraph.
Okay.
So just with the last sentence,
Okay.
no paragraph, no decision was made.
Right, okay, so we'll have to,
So amend that to the last sentence to be no decision made. With that, I would move we approve these minutes.
any other comments? Not all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And I saw no corrections on the October 1st meeting, so I would move that the October 1st meeting of the Select Board be approved as written.
All those indicate in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving right along. That's the reason we have all you folks here.
We're popular.
Okay.
And nobody's gonna know who you are. Saving the
Who I
day.
am.
That's one vote.
Hey, you might get two.
Okay, Carrie, do you want to outline the, what do you need?
Format.
Just wonder if you have the list of candidates.
Yes,
So what we're going to ask candidates to do is come up by office. We are then going to, I'm gonna be timekeeper for the event. And we're hoping, that's our plan, to do each response in 3 minutes. So this is gonna be a rather, hopefully succinct, answer to our questions, which are rather encompassing, so it's gonna be a challenge. But would you like to explain the questions, or do you want me to?
I think I want to talk about the topics we'd like them to address.
Okay. So, one, we'd like you to address the obvious polarization and how you might make that a little, make it a little better for those of us that operate at the local level. Polarization, different parties, that kind of thing. Number two is multi-part, but the cost of education concerns us all, as well as school safety. And I can't read my own writing. And then what your view on third would be what your view is on carbon tax. We'd like also to have someone address how we can possibly break the cycle of the drug problems that we're witnessing here locally, as well as, statewide. And that's kind of the short version.
I think in lieu of time, we dropped the carbon tax question.
Okay, that was. But so it's polarization, cost of education, school safety, and how we could possibly address some drug problems, trying to break that cycle that seems to be costing us all a lot of local and state tax dollars.
Just by way of background, it's kind of a turnstile justice. The police and everybody else, they do their job. They get to the cost system, and these people just seem to be out in the street the next day. So there seems to be little, if any, deterrent for the dealers. So how can you make it very expensive for the dealers, while at the same time trying to help those who are addicted? Okay, so what are we talking about, 3 minutes?
3 minutes is what we talked about. It's gonna be a challenge. You wanna,
Yes.
and we're gonna
No
have.
filibustering, please.
Probably just responded after. So you told me what office you want to start with. You have the list in front of
Start
you.
over with the state senator.
All right. And so then we need.
And how do you want to do this?
Probably have,
Just from each one come up to the chair and then rotate around?
we can have everyone from the office sit there. We can just go get chairs.
Okay.
And your time doesn't start till you hit the chair.
Can you clarify the time? Is it 3 minutes for everything or 3 minutes on each
Per
topic?
person.
Everything.
3 minutes for
Everything. All those. If you can address all those topics, so you may wish not to
While
address.
they're talking, you can go get the chairs.
Okay. We have okay. So
It's easier for the camera if you're sitting up there. I understand what you're saying. We have this whole center, but.
okay. So
So we're not going to have all three of them sit up there at the same time?
why not? If you can.
There's four.
Four. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
four, I'm sorry.
Justin Tanner
I
is
don't know who you're going to start with.
Get cozy.
Well, just like the Senate chambers.
Thanks, Ron.
Only said we do Senator.
Well, we're going to do Senate ones first.
Are you running for Senate now, Jim?
That's probably a better than I would say. at this
Jim's
point.
name is on every line.
No,
Franklin County's on board.
we don't want you making
Memorialized here. We were
Make
actually
sure we
here.
do that.
Ready to have me start?
Okay, Carrie, have the clock running?
I do.
Oh, we're going to be pretty brutal on the time.
That's fine. My name's Corey Parent. I'm a state representative right now for St. Albans City and 1/3 of St. Albans Town, up near Bruce's neighborhood there. So to kind of go through answers, I will answer the carbon tax question. The answer is no. That one doesn't take too much time. When it comes to polarization, In politics, I think my record speaks fairly clearly to that. I founded in my first term in the House the Millennial Action Project with Kay Sharam, and we worked together and brought legislators under 40 together to work on issues that were important to our generation, including the opiate epidemic. We continued that last year, and Dylan Giambattista and I wrote a letter. A representative out of Essex wrote a joint letter this year about kind of the polarization. I think our generation is going to lead that charge. I find my generation tends to be a lot less polarized when we get into leadership. I think we haven't been as entrenched, and we're a little more open-minded when it comes to issues. And I'd like to see, the state Senate needs that point of view in my mind. There's no one under the age of 40 in the state Senate, yet we constantly talk about issues about how do we bring young families to Vermont. So I think having someone from that perspective will be helpful. When it comes to school safety, I think, we need to continue to assess where our schools are. We put money in the Capitol bill last year in the legislature, and that is going on grants to local schools. I think inviting local school districts as they're doing tests with their local police departments and doing audits to get that information back to us as a state and get us a list of what it's going to cost and then come up with a solution there to help harden the schools. And then finally, to get to our opiate epidemic, I couldn't agree anymore with Chairman Nyhan. I think we've done a lot in terms of helping those with addiction, but I think we've really been soft on the other side. I think that's the next approach. I think it's continuing to support our law enforcement officials. I think it's looking for folks who are running for office to, whether it's state's attorney or so on, to be a little more aggressive on that front. My brother-in-law is a detective for the town of Essex, and I know a lot of folks in Chittenden County, and they've been devastated over the last 10 years of the work they put in to arrest somebody, and that person skips town and never brought to justice, and we need to do more to strengthen that piece for them. So I think I touched all your topics.
You have 30 seconds.
I got 30 seconds, so I can talk about what I want.
Cost of education.
Cost of education. That one we really have to dig in and look at. We built a system that doesn't incentivize local voters. Don't know the cost of the education system when they're voting on it. I mean, they see the cost, but they don't know what it means to their tax bill. You go and vote for the $55 million school budget at Maple Run, and you don't see what's going to happen to your tax rate on that same ballot. I think the better we can connect that vote to local voters, I trust that local voters will make the responsible decision. St. Albans town voters always have, and you guys know that. They've always been fiscally conservative, and I'd look to support that across the state.
Well done.
Very good. Speed dating.
Randy?
All right.
Okay. Let's start with polarization.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's just shutting off. Let's stop. State your name for the record.
Okay. I'm Randy Brock, and I'm running for re-election to the Senate. This will be my fourth term. But the issue of polarization is a real one, and I hope I addressed it a little bit. A column that I wrote was in VT Digger, it was in The Messenger, it was also in some other newspapers around the state. And we're different than Washington, and although there is polarization, we have different views. Serving in the Senate is not as polarized as you see in Washington, D.C. We actually talk with each other. We occasionally have a beer together, and we, once in a while, really, in fact, agree. More than we disagree on some key issues. At the same time, we still stand up for our principles, and we do a lot to convince people on the other side. And I think we'll continue to do that and encourage our other senators to do the same. The cost of education is difficult. Anything time you have, as part of the calculation, the coefficient of dispersion as an integral element of how you calculate school costs is too complicated. So one of the things that I added to the tax bill this past year as an amendment was the creation of a tax structure commission. It will take off on the work that the Blue Ribbon Tax Commission did about 4 years ago to look at all of our taxes as to how they ought to be reconfigured and rejiggered so that we can actually understand them and understand the effect of them. And the key is tax simplification and also a tax system that everybody can understand. Right now, you can't explain education funding. And it's because of the method that we keep, every time there's something that isn't quite right, we add an amendment, we add a change, and our tax system sort of looks like the federal tax code at this point. And it's time to correct it, and it's time to change it. So I think we're on the way to do that. That work, we funded it with $500,000. It will be done over the next 2 years. It'll be ready for the beginning of the 2021 biennium. And the key will be to put the the finger on legislators who are beginning to serve there to actually do something with the work and make those changes. There's no reason, for example, why we have no sales tax on locomotives, but we have a sales tax on boxcars. We have no sales tax on ferry boats, but we have, and it's that kind of nonsense that permeates the tax code that we need to fix. School safety. We spent an enormous amount of time passing things like S-55, which was a gun bill that frankly doesn't protect anybody, would have zero effect on any of the school shootings or any of the mass shootings over the past 35 years. But we spent virtually no time talking about how to harden schools, how to provide education and training to people to prevent attacks. And also we spent very little time improving the mental health system, which is really key to solving this problem. I hope that next year we'll spend more time doing that, and also we'll take another look at what goes into the capital bill in terms of funding school hardening.
Okay, Randy, thank you very much.
So, shall we switch?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Report? All right.
It'll help for the audio. It
Carrie,
will.
let me know when it's time.
As soon as you're ready.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pam McCarthy, and I am running for the Senate. In answer to your question around polarization, I think that it's critically important that we listen well to one another and that we do that across parties and across individual opinions. It's really critical that we come to agreement without being disagreeable. Randy noted his civility column this week. I say I have to support that greatly, and my experience certainly in nonprofit and in small business, as well as within really difficult situations oftentimes in state government and in my nonprofit world, having to collaborate and connect and communicate well with people is something that I would bring to the equation. And I think, to Randy's point and to Corey's as well, you try to set a climate of communication and civility, and you hope that people will meet you halfway. So I think that we can work on this at a local level much differently than what we see from the administration at the federal level, certainly. And this is Vermont. So I believe that, again, we can do things that bring us together versus drive us apart. When I think about the cost of education and school safety, I want to applaud the decisions that were made this year in response to very clear concerns that people had about sending their kids to school and knowing that they were safe, and young people feeling like they could be safe at school. I respect the idea of Second Amendment and people's rights to gun ownership, particularly responsible gun ownership, but I think it's really critical that within school and community settings, we are safe and that we can provide that. I think we've set the bar high for what it is that we can do going forward. We need to do more work around how to make the schools themselves safer. I think that will be the next leg around this, and there certainly are things going on right now. I saw a sign for a school gathering the other day about safety initiatives that they're happening, or that will be happening in that school for training for the community coming up relatively soon. And I think that, again, is where we're starting. So looking at what's possible and moving that forward is really critical. In terms of ed funding, I think we need to move away from the property tax and get to a different type of funding structure for our schools. Certainly, Act 46 is getting its legs now, and we're having some understanding what impact that's making. Act 166, similarly, we're seeing some repercussions from that in terms of how young children are being given their early education and how it is we're funding that. So I think if we reconsider what was proposed at the end of the last session that Mitzi Johnson put forward, there may be some areas where we could really make some progress in the next session. As far as the drug problems are concerned, my family has personal experience with this. We've lost two very close friends of my son's over the last few years, and I think we need to focus more on treatment and prevention. I think that's really essential, and I also think that we need to make sure that we are reinforcing the criminal justice system around the offenders that you were describing, Bill.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
It's pretty sensitive. You don't have to have it right.
Okay, yeah. I actually filmed a couple meetings. So when I was working with Northwest Access TV. So my name's Dustin Tanner. I am from Fairfield, the Fairfield-Enosburg line. First question about polarization. I used to be somebody who would think left versus right when it came to this topic. And as I've gotten older, and within the last year alone, I've come to understand that we got to talk about the issues and you got to remove the political label. So one of the things I've been doing on my campaign is removing the political label as much as I can, and I'd continue to do that. And I loved Randy's piece in the Messenger and this VT Digger about that. I think that's a great place to start, and I think let's remove the political labels and go from there. Education. I want to address education first before I address the other ones because I work in a school every day. I do 40 hours as an IT guy in a school. See Bruce at least once a week. I think we have a lot of high schoolers right now that don't have a direction. I think instead of hardening our schools, we can work on giving high schoolers direction. I think we can, when it comes to safety, I see a lot of kids who are roaming the halls because they don't like the curriculum and it doesn't work for what type of learner they are. So I would invest in things like after-school programs. I would invest in things like tech centers. I was a problem student in high school, and I went to Cold Hollow Career Center in Enosburg, and it made me the man I am today because I learned a trade, I learned a skill. Investing in that. Also, resource officers. I'm a big believer in having a school resource officer. I think they can help students learn about the criminal justice system, and I think having school resource officers in our elementary schools doesn't make the police scary as well, so I think that helps a lot. Education funding, property taxes are too high. And with high property taxes, you don't have people wanting to buy land in Vermont. So I would like to move to a system where we use income-based sensitivity to help lower that burden. I've looked at using a income tax for education, and it's just a little too volatile where I would feel comfortable using that because if the economy crashes again, you really can't do anything about that. So I would like to move to where we use the income sensitivity to calculate our property taxes. And then the other one was the opioids. I go back to the same thing I do with high schoolers. Nobody wakes up and says they're going to use heroin today. It is a trajectory. It is a path. It happens after you hurt your knee and then you are prescribed something for pain. And I would like to move to a system where we help treat people and help get them back into the workforce. Where we are lacking right now is the follow-up. We treat people and then we let them out and we don't help them find jobs. We don't train them with skills and then they reoffend. If you help people get into good paying jobs, the likelihood that they will reoffend goes down. And I think we can rework our criminal justice system to make it so people who are getting locked up for these things aren't on the street the very next day, and we are helping them get to recovery where they can become productive members of society, because that's what we want from everybody, is a productive member of society. How much time do I got left?
Yep.
Good? All right.
Okay, thank you all
Thank
very
you all.
much. Appreciate it. See you at the polls. Okay. Next group will be Franklin 3-1. Please tell me what that is all again. That's a city and town?
Yeah, so it's basically Route 7, west side of, or east side of Route 7 to Georgia, the interstate to 36.
Okay,
So
must be
basically where Bruce and I live.
being very hotly contested. We have Casey and we have Jim Fitzgerald, Kate LaRose, and Mike McCarthy.
Do the same shuffle.
Sure. Okay. Okay, the same drill, 3 minutes.
Whenever you're ready.
Great. Well, hi. Thank you very much for having us this evening. I'm Mike McCarthy, and I'm the first of the candidates for the record running for the Franklin 3-1 state representative seat, which does cover St. Albans City, but also the town south of the city. So I serve on the city council right now, your counterpart in the city, and I really appreciate some of the renewed spirit of collaboration that's been between the town and the city municipal governments. To get to the first question around polarization, in this campaign, the polarization has mostly come out, online in quiet strokes. All of these candidates here have been incredibly civil to one another, and while we have our policy disagreements, I think we've all been a shining example of what it means to be running in Vermont in terms of personally and publicly treating each other with respect. When I was on the House Transportation Committee when I served in the legislature in the 2013-2014 session. I had a Republican chair, and I'm a Democrat, Pat Brennan from Colchester. We became friends, and my best friend, Duncan Kilmartin, on that committee was one of the most conservative guys you could possibly meet. Our politics did not line up very well, and what we did was we did Act 250 reform together and worked on a bill. We got the real estate developer folks together with the natural resources folks, and were able to get legislation passed quickly. So that's what the experience that I bring together in terms of bi and tripartisanship. Around our schools, I really want to focus first on maintaining the quality education that I think Vermonters have come to respect from our schools. So when we talk about cost, we have to look at where are the centers of where we're spending that isn't giving our students the best experience and the preparation for a 21st century workplace. I want to make sure that the state is providing the space for partnerships between employers. We've seen great work in Franklin County from the WIB in terms of the Workforce Investment Board, in terms of getting our students ready for STEM careers and partnering with employers. And I want to encourage more of that so that our education is preparing students the best that it possibly can. I agree with what's been said around moving more toward an income-based system while trying to maintain some of the structural consistency of the property tax, but we're over-reliant on the property tax. And one of the ways that we can sort of pull away from that reliance on our ed spending is to actually have our education dollars being spent on education and the social services that we've come to be providing in schools. We need to treat those items as separate in our budgeting, and I think that's a place where the legislature can provide some leadership in the coming years so that we get some of those cost centers out of our ed funding and reduce pressure on the property tax that way. And on opiates, my mother's running for the Senate, and she touched on it. I've actually lost 3 close friends to opiates, to substance use disorders, and it's affected our family incredibly. We will not be able to police our way out of opiates, but I appreciate that we have to start with criminal justice reform and start with the kind of thing like we did collaboratively, the city and the town, investing in the street crimes unit where we think those dollars can be effective at making our streets safer. I'll continue to support law enforcement in that way, but what we really need to do is have a much more restorative justice system to focus on evidence-based policing, community policing, and end the use of private prisons. We're spending way too many dollars sending Vermonters out of state. We need the resources here so that we can be putting the most dangerous and complex offenders in jail, and then also have the money to be able to treat people in the most evidence-based, effective ways. We're doing some things right now where we're throwing money at the problem in terms of medically assisted therapies that are actually in the long run not the most effective way we could be spending dollars to help the most people get from being on the street to treatment and into recovery. And as a parent, I'm very concerned with school safety. My daughter started at city school. I want to make sure more kids show up ready to learn.
Thanks. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Am I all set?
You are.
You're on.
Well, first of all, thank you again for letting us come here and hear what we have to say. My name's Casey Toof. I think I'm the only candidate up here that is from or lives in the town right now. I'm from the city, but I live over on Clyde Island Drive, and I've lived here my whole life. One of the main reasons I am running is because there is an affordability problem. So we talk about, to answer your question, that we were going to skip the carbon tax. No, I don't agree with the carbon tax. The second one would be education. Education spending is one of the reasons we have high property taxes. Number one thing I hear going door to door is that it's too expensive to live here. So within the education, we have some great schools. We have great teachers in our schools. I think St. Albans City, St. Albans Town, BFA, they do a great job. I went to city school. I went to BFA. I think they do a great job. My background is I have a degree in history and education. That's what I was going to go to school for. So if a lot of people ask what committee you would want to be on, I think education would be one that I'd want to focus on when we were there if I'm elected. One of the big problems with schools these days today is school safety. I think I want to echo a lot of what other people have said. I don't think that I think everyone has the goal of school safety. I think that's what everybody wants. The governor actually passed. He pushed $5 million to increase school safety measures around the state. This last session, I think that's something that I would continue to look into. I would continue to look at those kinds of policies. And what's the next one? Opioids. I think the hub and spoke system that we have currently has been working. I think treatment is the answer. I also think that it would be beneficial to go harder on the drug dealers and those that are taking advantage of Vermont's most vulnerable people. I think everyone in this room probably knows a story or has a friend or a loved one that has battled opiates. I think that's the only thing is, to touch on polarization, that was the other question. We all are running for, I think, the same reason. I think we all have good intentions. Not one person up here in this room has bad intentions why we're running. I think we just have different ways to get to those goals, and we have different goals to get there, which is great. I think that's something that's really important in this state, because on the national scene we're getting, it's a nightmare when you turn on the TV and see what's going on down in Washington. Vermont's a little different. Vermont, you can go to your legislator's house and knock on their door, give them a call. They're very accessible, and that's something that I will continue to do if I was to win. And I think that's just one of the differences in why Vermont is probably a better place to live than other places, is that we have people willing to step up and give their ideas. And I really applaud everyone that is running, because it's not an easy job to do that. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Casey. Thank you. Okay. Why do it?
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs again.
Our first test.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us.
Jim, good seeing you.
I'm Jim Fitzgerald. For those who don't know me, I'm fully familiar with this room. I served here for a short time as manager of this community, so I think I have some kind of an idea of what the town problems are as well as the cities, having served there as mayor and a city council member for a number of years. I've also served 3 terms in the Vermont legislature in the House, and I think I have a general idea of how to work both sides of the aisle. You need someone down there with experience that knows how to get that done, because I want to tell you something. In the first year or 2 that you're there, unless you're willing to compromise and work with the other side of the aisle, you're dead in the water. I've seen it firsthand. It happened to me in 1969 when I first went there. That's a long time ago, but I know what it takes to work both sides of the aisle. It's not being done very well today as we speak, but I know how to do it. The second question is school safety, was it?
School funding and school safety.
First of all, I believe that 46 was a knee-jerk reaction to screaming and hollering by some people who didn't know what they were talking about. It wasn't thoroughly thought out. It's not properly designed, and you're going to, I believe, see the end of Act 46 soon. I don't think they're going to pursue it now. Maplewood and St. Albans is a different deal. That seems to be working well. I'm a stickler when it comes to local control. I insist on local control. I think we know better what we want for our schools locally than those in Montpelier do. Some guy from Brattleboro doesn't know what St. Albans Town needs, and one size doesn't fit all. And so I would cherish the thought of doing something about Act 46. Bring it back to the people. Then we wanted to talk about cost.
Cost.
Some folks sitting in this room, in fact, believe that if you have a drop in enrollment, school costs will automatically drop. Not true. The fixed costs don't go away. The heat is still on, the lights are still on, they still shovel the driveway and mow the lawns. There are costs in our school system today that are out of this world. I would push for more involvement in our tech centers. I don't think every child needs to go to Harvard. Our tech centers, Casey and I this summer met with the director of VOCAC up here in St. Albans at BFA, and she went on to tell me that a man was looking for 4 employees, no experience necessary, installing heat pumps in the Essex area. $18 an hour, $21 an hour in, I guess, 30 days on Casey. She could not produce the 4. She did not have the 4.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you very much. Just a second. There we go.
You're good, Jim.
You want to sit here?
No.
You don't talk loud, you know, Liz.
Kate, I got it. I'm all set. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. All right.
Ron.
So I will pass these around for folks who want to take a look at my website and learn more about
wanna
where
do
I
that, Mr.
stand
Chairman?
on.
Do it after. We'll take a look after we hear.
Thank you.
Ma'am,
So people can take a look and see more about where I stand on issues and my background and experience. But to start with, the first question is around polarization. This time last year, politics was still a dirty word to me because of this exact issue of polarization. And what I quickly learned is if you don't do politics, politics does you. If you care about the cost that you're paying at the gas pump, if you care about how much it costs to be able to have an affordable house, if you want to make sure that your child has access to quality learning, you are already doing politics. But here's what I see when I go to the doors. People either have two reactions. There's partisan reaction. Which party are you? I don't want to talk to you if you're not my party. Or I don't do politics. People are afraid. There's a lack of engagement. When I ask people, what do you want when you think about the candidates that you want to vote into office? Like, what are you looking for? They're not looking for policies. They're not looking for parties. What they're looking for is integrity, trust, and the ability to create dialogue. When I came into this realm of working with the community around polarization 2 summers ago, what we did is we pulled together 10 people who had voted for Trump, 10 people who had voted for Clinton, not to decide what we can, to change anyone's minds, but to decide what can we agree on together. We are a community. This isn't about tax policy at the national level. This isn't about immigration. This is about what do we as community members, what can we agree on? What can we work on together? That's what we need to continue to do at the local level. That's what we need to continue to do at the State House. In terms of, and one more thing that I'll add is as soon as we found out who was running for office, the first thing I did is reached out to every single person running and invite them for a cup of coffee to sit down and have a conversation. I believe that that's what we need as candidates, is the ability to talk to one another. With cost of education, many folks have already said that, and I will just add to it. So I served 6 years at the Agency of Education, specifically working with supervisory units around the state on alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse prevention. Education, Randy said, is complicated. It absolutely is complicated. It is not an easy system to figure out. It's also not a fair system right now. When we look at property tax as funding our education system, this is not a fair way. It's a regressive tax when you look at who is paying the most. So I would agree with what others have said, that we need to move from property tax to income tax. It's fairer, it's simpler to understand, and it's going to mean lower taxes for aging Vermonters, particularly those who are retired, and for young families just starting out. I also believe in, for the drug problems question, was it drug, what was the exact question, sir?
How do you help the addicts and punish the dealers?
Yeah. I think we need to punish the dealers. I think we very much need to punish the dealers, and we need to make them pay. And the most egregious drug dealers in the state are Big Pharma. So we need to hold them responsible. We need to hold them responsible through taxation. We need to hold them responsible by making them pay for the damages that they knew full well was going to be a problem when they pushed this on physicians and didn't tell them what the impacts were and didn't tell
actually,
people
you're
what
out
the
of time,
impacts are.
sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I gave you a little more because we
Okay.
interrupted.
Kate, gentlemen, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. You want these, Mr. Chairman?
Well, yeah, pass them around, you know, it's, read that at leisure. You went to Brian, Brenda.
They're in their district.
Yeah, you want to learn about the candidates anyway. Okay. Okay, next up we'll have Franklin 3-2. That's Lynn Dickinson and Dave McWilliams.
Good to see you. Yeah, we've been here before.
Just 2 years ago, I think.
I think you were sitting over there, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll start. Thank you very much. My name is Lynn Dickinson. I live in St. Albans town. I represent 3-2. I've been there for 10 years now. I've served on 3 committees, the Commerce and Economic Development Committee, the Corrections and Institution Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. So I've had the privilege to learn a great many things during the course of the last 10 years on a variety of subjects in depth. On polarization, one of the things that I have done during my 10 years is I worked with none other than David Zuckerman in the Senate on the Lyme disease bill to allow physicians to be able to support and report and to support their patients without being brought before the medical board. We worked on that together. We had meetings with the Lyme group. We did a lot of things together. I also worked on a licensed alcohol and drug counseling bill in cooperation with a lot of people in the, well, I went before the Committee of Human Services all the time, and the chairman, Ampew, and Sandy Haas, and others who were Democrats and a progressive, constantly tried to put my little bill into other bills dealing with human services, dealing with drug issues and counseling. And those both eventually passed, but that was, I've worked with other people that are Democrats, obviously, and other Republicans, but those are two really good examples of trying to work across party lines in a tri-party way with people that you share values with and that you're trying to, move the ball along. As far as school cost, I voted against Act 46. It did try to put a cap on cost spending, which all of the school boards and superintendents hated. And so that was done away with the following year. But it also did create a consolidation system for the schools. We are familiar with that. I'm familiar with that. I served on the board of BFA, dealt with the issues regarding back in the 80s and 90s and then in 2000s where we tried to create both a unified K through 12 system with the city and town and BFA, and then eventually a Union High School, and of course now what we have is Maple Run. And I always supported that effort. Fairfield was never in the mix at that point, but it is now. I mean, the issues with Act 46 is I don't think it really is going to cut the cost. They got some administrative costs that they cut, that's a one-time cut, and then they lowers the base and it's just going to continue to rise. There are a lot of things that we can do. We've got overcapacity, we've got a lot fewer students. And I know that the other goal of Act 46 was to provide opportunity for schools, in small schools, for people that you only have in larger schools. That's something that we will see if we can do that, because that's really a worthwhile effort. As far as the school safety, there's a couple of things here. I did participate in the community day at BFA. They invited me to come and talk to the students, and as being on judiciary, I heard a lot of things about school safety and the gun bills and all sorts of things that we dealt with the opiates as well. But we
Thank you very much.
I don't like the carbon tax. I would vote no on that.
You ready?
I am.
Well, the reason I'm running is that if I wasn't running against Lynn Dickinson, she'd be up here all by herself. So I felt that the issues had to be addressed. And one of the reasons I like running for office is to bring out problems that are existing in Vermont. As far as polarizing the different parties, I'm going to use Jimmy Fitzgerald. Jimmy was a Democrat. Now he's a Republican. I think you ought to do away with the two-party system. You're there for the people that put you in office, and you should be working for those people. As far as the carbon tax, anybody that votes for that, if they get elected down there, they ought to resign automatically because of the fact that it's going to destroy the people here in the state of Vermont. Our senior citizens right now are having problems even to afford to live in this area in the state of Vermont. So I would vote totally against the carbon tax. 88 cents is totally stupid. As far as funding education, education should be funded through a income tax base based on your income, because the property taxes right now, the town portion's okay, the education costs, it keeps on rising, and we need to find a way to fund it the way it should be. Safety in the schools, I think that, BFA, I'll use an example, they have one officer up there. There's two different schools up there, and they can't be everywhere at the same time. So they need better security up there, and same with St. Albans Town Educational Center. As far as the
Safety.
the what?
Safety.
Safety, you got to do something better than what we got. As far as the taking in, what was the last one?
Drugs. Oh, drug issue.
Well, the Byard Center, we were spending $8.7 million for transportation throughout the state of Vermont. Now we got our own treatment center up here. That is working. If you go up there at 7 o'clock in the morning, the parking lot's full. But we need to get a hold of the dealers, and the dealers are going to pay a stiffer penalty than what they are. Our court system in the district court, if you go up there on a Tuesday or Thursday, they at least get 100 cases of different items that are on the agenda. So I think that we got to do something to make our court system better than it is at the present time.
All right.
Okay, thanks very much,
Thank
David.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'd like to thank all of you candidates who are running for
We
the
do.
House and Senate.
Okay, fine, sorry.
You have time for a couple of quick questions?
Well, we have two more candidates,
Forward.
the probate judge candidates, although they probably won't speak to all of those
Yeah,
points,
their focus may be a little different.
might be a little different.
That's what I was going to say. Our focus ought to be a little different, because as you know, we're not legislators.
You have the soapbox, Bob, so.
But you still have 3 minutes.
Okay. I never need any votes, 31st.
Anytime.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, I'm running for probate judge, and for those who might not know, the probate court is one of the areas within the Vermont Superior Court system. The probate court handles estates of deceased persons and guardianships and adoptions. Those are perhaps the major points. The present judge is not seeking re-election. That's Larry Bruce, and I've decided to run for the position. The previous judges over the past 18, 20, 25 years have made it basically a full-time position. By that I mean they haven't had a private law practice. Larry Bruce, when he took over, he didn't practice law anymore and became a full-time judge. Same thing with Bob Cronin, and I think even the same thing with John Webster before him. And that's what I would pledge to do, become a full-time judge and not have a private law practice. That, I think, is perhaps the main difference between myself and Vaughn, that he would be keeping his private law practice. And basically, in terms of that issue, the main issue that I think the probate judge candidates can address is the polarization issue. And even though Vaughn and I have a difference of opinion, really, in terms of the part-time versus full-time issue, nevertheless, we're conducting an open discussion and having a polite discussion about it. The probate court is basically a people's court in line with that polarization issue. A lot of litigants come in without an attorney, and so in terms of polarization, I think a probate judge can ease the process. And when you go into court as the probate judge, treat all the litigants with dignity and courtesy. I think that's very important in terms of polarization also. But in terms of Democratic versus Republican, once a judge is sworn in, that evaporates and you just are there to serve the people. So I personally feel that I'm very qualified to be the probate judge, having spent my entire law career here in Franklin County. I was an Army veteran, and then I was a deputy state's attorney, and then I was a public defender, and I have been in private practice for a good number of years. I've been in partnership with Bill Kunis, who's still in practice, and I was in practice with Greg Grainville, who was elevated to the bench a few years ago. And I might add that I was the city attorney for St. Albans City for quite a few years, and we did have some cases at that time even involving St. Albans Town. I think most of them were resolved amicably, and so I was glad to get involved with the town attorney at that time too, which was mostly Mike Gaughan perhaps and Joe Cahill. And in terms of probate court cases, I've handled hundreds of probate court cases over the years. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. I'm Vaughn Como, and I'm running for probate court. I grew up in Swanton, graduated from MBU. Like many young Vermonters, I left Vermont to attend college. I returned briefly to work in an environmental testing lab in Colchester, and then I was whisked away by the international company that owned it to the UK for 3 years, where I worked on World Bank environmental contracts in the former Soviet Union. I came back to Vermont with my wife because we wanted to raise a family here. And my experience with probate court is not only professional, but we were lucky to adopt a little girl 3 years ago. So I've been a client of the probate court also, and I understand the impact the probate court can have on a person, on a family, and making things better for that family. As Bob said, his major focus in this campaign is that he's going to be a full-time judge. contrary to what he states, none of the previous judges have worked full-time. It's a part-time position. The other judges didn't have a private practice, but they only worked part-time and only were required to work part-time. 9 out of the 14 judges that have probate judges in the state have maintained a private practice. And I have a thriving practice in Enosburg. I have 5 people that work for me. There's no reason for me to abandon my community and lay off those people to do a part-time job that can be done on a part-time basis. My probate experience in the last 5 years, I've had 130 probate cases in Franklin County. Bob said he's had hundreds over the years, but he's had 7 in the last 5 years. I've had 230 probate cases statewide in the last 6 years. So I have current relevant experience in the probate court. The probate court will be my first priority. I'm going to dedicate whatever time is necessary to run that office. I don't know what my practice will look like. I don't know how much time it will take to be a probate judge, but that will be my first priority. I have professional staff in Enosburg. I have professional staff at the court that will assist me in that and will manage both of those things professionally and efficiently as we do. In my previous career, before I went to law school, I was a manager and I specialized in turnaround and management. I would take offices that were underperforming, evaluate the staff, and make them successful. Unfortunately, as soon as I made them successful, they moved me to another office, so I didn't get to reap the benefits of that practice. Availability to do a job is a prerequisite. It's not a qualification. When I hire somebody, I look at their experience and I look at their references. And I hope the voters will do that when they do vote for me. I've been overwhelmingly endorsed by the local attorneys. I was actually heavily recruited to run for this office. I tell people I haven't run for anything since high school, and I know why. But I wanted to serve my community, and this is the opportunity to do that. So I hope the voters will do the same, look at our experience, look at our references, and pick the best person for that job.
Just on time, Vaughn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time management is one of my things.
That should be everyone.
Okay. So I'm going to take a few minutes in case anybody in the audience has a question for any of the candidates. Now's your chance. Going once. Going twice. Gone. Okay, so thank you all very much. We appreciate your coming forward to serve the people. Thank you, and safe homes.
Yeah, that is me.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
We can't actually take much of this, to tell you the truth. They can maybe, but I can't.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
take one of those. Thank you.
No, I got a vicious dog. Vicious dog.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again. It's sort of pretty all.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. Thanks to the timekeeper for keeping everybody honest.
Just like that, we're alone. They complied.
Yeah. Hey. Whew. Now we're back to normal.
That's it, yeah.
Bob, why are you sticking around? No, I'm just
Love you too, man.
Be a slow football night, I
Well,
guess.
he has to go home, either going to be
Our team
football or
Yeah,
for dinner, right?
I know what it is. He
Right.
needs a ride.
Right. I know he got here with his truck, I'm sure. Okay. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the
Decision for the vicious dog.
dog, right?
Yeah.
I read the order and I found it to be in order, and I don't know if anybody else has any
Yeah,
suggestive changes, but I'll motion to approve it.
And if you could,
Did we say
passes, will authorize the chair to sign.
something?
Okay. Yeah, just reading the draft order, it's a classic presentation. It's really, really well done. Any other questions or comments about it? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
David had a question.
Could you read it, please?
Do you have the one that I'm going to sign at hand?
He did not send it to us yet, but I'm going to have him submit it.
Would you like a copy of it? It's about 4 pages long.
Yeah, I'd like to copy.
Okay.
You have a copy in your email, but
Well,
we
I
can
can
send
say,
you one.
I give you the key pieces of the order if you like.
Yeah.
All right.
Conclusions and protective
Yeah,
order.
Katie McWilliams and Dylan Gazale shall, the dog shall be muzzled and leashed at all times when it is outdoors. It must be licensed, registered, and vaccinated in accordance with Vermont law, and fed to comply with the conditions set forth in this order, shall allow the Select Board, its agents and assigns to take immediate possession of the black pit bull and transfer it to an animal shelter or rescue organization. And the owner of the black pit bull shall be subject to the penalties provided for in VSA, in 20 VSA, and the town of St. Albans Animal Control Officer, effective June 1st, 2018. And it says this has been approved by the Select Board.
We're gonna send that certified mail to all known addresses where she lives.
We're gonna provide service
Yeah.
per our legal counsel, yes. I'm not sending them to something as vague as all known references, but I'm gonna send them to whatever our attorney recommends.
Okay, all those in favor, indicate by
we
saying
already
aye.
did
We do that, just make sure, okay?
Aye.
Yep.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is the suggestion that our harassment policy and complaint procedure be revised in our personnel policy. This is a motion made by you, Al.
Yes.
Maybe you want to explain it?
Certainly. In looking at our existing policies, it focuses primarily on sexual harassment. And from my experience as a manager, that we also need a policy to just, if you will, non-sexual harassment, which is equally important, particularly in terms of setting standards for the general conduct of people, working people within the municipality. So for me, it's a broad range policy to cover everybody, but to set standards of how we behave, whether you're in the Public Works Department or you're in the building assessors or listers or what have you. Sets a standard for behavior and conduct. I know some people think that it's directed at some people. That was not my original intent. Then I had the fortune of having to spend 3 days with myself in the car driving to South Carolina. And I realized that there is one person, me, that this would be very helpful to in terms of my own bad behavior, which I have been admonished for. So it does cover a broad range from myself right down to the person who's cleaning the parks or fixing the streets, setting tax policies for housing, things like that. So I would ask that we incorporate this into our general policy for personnel policies.
Anybody have comments to make? So, Brendan, you have a comment?
No.
No.
I read it. I think it would make a good addition to our personnel policy.
Bruce?
Well, I've got a little bit of concern with it. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but wasn't our policies reviewed by VLTC and found to be adequate, if not more than adequate, for as a policy?
I have not had VLCT review all of our policy recently.
But this wasn't recently.
When maybe 5-6 years ago, is that what you're talking about?
I thought it was less than that.
I don't recall having them review this. I was asked by another select board member if I thought our current policy was legal, and I think it is legal, but I haven't specifically had any attorney review it recently. I read the VLCT memo as a best practice, but definitely they did not imply that we were non-compliant right now. I guess that's a good summary.
You may be referring to this past June, we had the attorney Karen Stockpole, who was with Frank, Paul, and Collins.
Okay, it wasn't VLCT then.
Gave us the seminar on the workplace seminar and
Respect
so on.
in the workplace.
Respect in the workplace.
Yeah.
And her comment was that our policy is considered much more than adequate. And we were well covered. Now, our policy, although it doesn't go into great length, it does specifically include any illegal harassment of any kind. And of course, in general, we are subject to federal and state law, which is perhaps a little more encompassing than our policy. And my final statement on this is, if we don't have an open door policy where people should be able to go to anyone to register a complaint.
Absolutely.
And I know it specifically states in here that it's the manager, but if the manager is non-responsive or the subject of a complaint and so on, that person should feel free to contact the select board individually or as a group and go from there. So that's the end. Stan, any comment?
Yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at it, and I looked at the latest from VLCT that they recommend, and we, I believe, are in compliance with our current documentation. I looked at the one from Milton and Colchester, of course, and they have a much larger group of people. What we have is 12 people now. 12 people. The elected officials aren't in it. The town clerk is elected, she's not in it. And if Lisa, she's appointed, she's not in it. So I feel comfortable with what we have. I don't see a need for a change. And, you know, that brought a little smile to my face, to be honest with you, Al. And I've talked to different people. I had 5 kids and they were young. And we'd go for a ride and they'd get into an argument. And they said, "Dad, looking at me now." And I see we have this in here, a visual. To me, I can't stand that anymore. No, my kids were young and put a cooler to separate them. But do we need this in our documentation here for 12 good people? Absolutely not. I don't agree. We don't need it. I think Milton's and Colchester's police department is bigger than what we have. Maybe they need something like that because of the diversity. But as far as doing something like that in our documentation, no. We do have sexual harassment, and not sexual, but we also have harassment in the workplace here. We're covered. And I don't want to be so tight that if somebody can't smile at another person and somebody takes offense, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I looked at the city, and I will tell you something else, Al. Everybody's got an HR person. Colchester, Milton, St. Albans City. Do you think we gotta hire a person for 12 people? Absolutely not. So, I'm not for it. I don't see a need for a change.
I appreciate the thought and the effort you put into this, even though I disagree with
I do too.
the proposal.
I would just comment, I don't mind having an open door policy. I don't believe that employees should be going to the select board with complaints. As their appeal board, they're supposed to come to the town manager, and if they disagree with something I've decided on, then they go to you and appeal that decision, but if
I
they
think
come
the-
to you
Fair enough, but
directly.
I said we have the open door policy, they have to go to you first,
Correct.
obviously.
They should understand the chain of command to begin with.
Right, I just
I mean,
wanna make sure I
anybody that called me,
understand.
Carrie, with a complaint, I'd simply ask them if they'd been to you first. If they said no, I wouldn't listen to it.
And we just would
Yeah,
encourage
because my
them to
comment
go.
was if you're the object
Correct.
of the complaint,
Yep.
obviously they're not gonna complain to you and
Right.
expect, you to be both welcomed with open arms.
Right, I'm like,
So
"Oh, I
they need
lost
to know
it."
that,
See,
you know,
I just don't feel
they can
comfortable
bring it
with
to
that.
somebody, and I don't think, if they came to me, that's not my call to decide anything.
Right, okay,
But half of the 12 people report directly to you.
I know,
So, I mean,
yeah,
It's not, I'm sure it's not gonna be an issue, but just, people have to understand that,
Right.
I don't like the idea of somebody might have a little problem with somebody else and said, oh, wait a minute, he's just been staring at me for over 2 minutes now. So,
Okay.
you know, I don't go for that, so.
I think you're trivializing it totally. Bullying is a major factor in our life.
What is?
Bullying.
Bullying, okay.
And I think this gets to that point. And when, Stan, you talked about your grandchildren, I'm sure that they are subject to bullying. We hire a lot of young people in the summertime. If we have a expectation of their behavior in writing, it then helps set the tone for employment. I'm not talking about us old folks. I'm talking about the larger picture of our younger folks.
those kids may pull a little prank now and then, but, I mean, Alan is right there and Robbie. I mean, we have 5 young people.
Yeah, but bullying's a separate policy, completely. Yes, it is. We have a separate bullying policy at work.
You do?
I don't know
Maybe
that we
because
have
it's a
it.
school, but we do.
He
He's
does.
talking about
Oh,
him.
with you.
Yeah, right, yeah.
He's talking about
That
there.
could be interesting to look up. I'm curious as to what a municipal bullying, or a school, you know, just I will say
Bullying,
that
unfortunately, is something that's in the eye of the beholder in many ways. So,
I will say that last year's version of our personnel policy versus this year is a substantial improvement. We did work well together to get to where we were to where we are now. And this conversation, I would say it was a lot, we were talking about polarization earlier, was a lot more productive and civil than maybe the last time we spoke about this. So thank you all for that.
okay, with that, why don't we take a vote? All those in favor of adopting the proposal put forward by Al, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, I,
No. So the motion fails, Al.
Okay.
So maybe the next time we do the overhaul, that's the time to take a look at it again, line by line. Okay, Carrie, Bruce wanted me to remind you there is a football game on tonight.
So I got 5 minutes.
Dancing with the Stars, is that what you want?
Dancing with the Stars.
One or the other.
There could be football players on Dancing with the Stars.
There are.
Dressed as football players.
Right.
Oh.
Okay.
So I'll briefly go over, the DPW update is the first on there, and those of us that are working on it are aware of it, but for those that aren't, we did put out a bid for, requests for qualifications and requests for bids for design. That went out last week on Wednesday on our website. We hired Matt Young as our project manager. Matt Young is taking, all questions and looking, to answer whatever you might need. If you know someone you think is interested in it, this is the time to contact Matt or us if you need his contact information. The bids are closing in a couple weeks, so by 10/24, and by the end of the month, we will be awarding at least the design portion of the bids. So we have a really tight timeline here. We're trying to get the designs done so that we can get the project bid and get the numbers back in January. So it's very tight, and that's explained on our website. Any questions that have come up, Matt is doing responses in the form of addendums. He issued addendum 1 today, and I have copies for you all. And by the 22nd, he will be issuing the last addendum, and then allowing companies to bid. So that's exciting progress for us. trying to think if there was anything else. We did put it on Works in Progress, as well as a local paper. And we're gonna, oh, and the other thing is, in order to keep current with this timeline, I'm hoping that the select board can meet on the 29th of October to review those bids at 5 o'clock.
I don't have a problem with that.
Are we meeting on the 29th anyway, aren't we?
No,
Oh, it's a different date.
that would be, it's the last Monday of the month.
It's
Oh,
Monday.
okay.
Two
It
weeks,
wasn't a
2 weeks
regular-
from tonight.
Right, it wasn't a regular night, but we will be meeting that night.
Okay.
And that's all I have on that one, unless you can think of
So we
something
want to
else.
make sure we have a
What
quorum,
time?
so
5 o'clock?
Yep.
10.
be there.
Brendan?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Great.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
The second item is very quick. We did send out a second wave of surveys about 3 weeks ago. Amy from UVM Extension Service said that people are sending them in. But if you get a survey, please send it in. If you know someone who got one, please encourage them to do so. The answers and responses are going to help us as we move forward and decide what we're going to spend money on or what we're going to study to then try to get done. So it's pretty important. It should only take a couple minutes.
Gary, the 500 gives them what confidence level? 96%?
95 is what we're going, or maybe it's 96. I haven't looked at that original contract roll, but
Closer to what we want.
what we asked for is what we're going to be getting with the amount of responses we have.
Good.
But any more is better. More is better.
Sure, sure.
Last item is a request for water and sewer allocation from Mr. Hungerford for Ruse Drive. Briefly, they're gonna put a shop there. No, I don't know what they were asking for.
A contractor's
Contractor
store,
shop.
right, yeah.
Yep. And they're requesting, it was a minimal request, but, 1 EU was about,
Doesn't really matter to him, right?
right. The applicant is proposing to build a contractor shop as part of an existing commercial subdivision on Ruse Drive. They will have a maximum of 33 employees, resulting in design flows of less than 1 EU per day for both water and sewer.
what is a contractor's shop? I mean, is it like a warehouse or like a construction company or?
That's what it sounded like to
Oh,
me.
okay.
A central point for people to come back and, yeah.
Pretty low usage for
But the affiliation fee, it doesn't matter if you get 1 EU or 400, you pay the same.
Pay the same amount.
That is correct. Yep,
Same to the city for the affiliation.
right. So I'm looking for
You need a motion for that?
approval.
Get a motion?
Yes.
So moved.
Al's made it, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
Okay, and I don't believe I have any other surprises.
No, we don't want surprises, thank you.
I don't have any additions on there, so I'm done with my report.
Just to remind folks that Election Day is the 6th of November, and that absentee ballots are available right now. You can contact the town clerk for an absentee ballot.
That's it for me.
That's about it.
Move to adjourn?
Well, our schedule roughly, our next meetings in November are the 5th and the 19th. We are closed for Thanksgiving and the day after. And for Veterans Day, November 12th, Monday.
Monday, okay, very good.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no other business, and Al's motion is on the floor. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that candidate forum went pretty well and moved along quickly.
Yes, it did.